Serious Sam provides a unique experience that other first-person shooters have yet to imitate. However, the games do not have much of any discussion around them besides the usual reviews and hype for new releases. I find that disappointing as the series contains a lot to explore which seems to get ignored even by its fans. I hope to change that. I will examine Serious Sam the First Encounter, such as discussing how well it weaves its story into its ancient Egyptian setting, the different roles that the weapons and the enemies serve, what design choices were done great and what was done poorly, and more. I will first cover what version of the First Encounter to play, how to buy the game, and its backstory before analyzing the game itself. It's a lot more complicated than you think due to all the different versions of it, forcing me to clarify and discuss it. As always, timestamps are in the description if you want to jump to any other part or to conveniently watch later. Serious Sam unfortunately has too many releases with no concrete version to play. However, it's easier if we separate them by the engine that they use, and I'll be comparing them in the context of the First Encounter. First, we have the Serious Engine 1, which is what Serious Sam Classic uses, the original release of the game. Serious Sam Revolution uses an updated version of that engine, so let's consider that an iteration on Classic. The other is Serious Engine 3, which is what Serious Sam HD uses, a remaster of the original release. Serious Sam Fusion uses the Serious Engine 2017, which for simplicity's sake we'll consider an iteration on HD. The odd one out is Serious Sam Xbox, which also uses the Serious Engine 1. It's a port of both the first and second encounters packaged together into a single game for the original Xbox. There's a lot more that was done besides just porting it, and it's a shame that playing it is limited to either having a physical copy or emulating it. I do, however, have news fresh off the presses. There is a mod that recreates the Xbox version on PC by a modder named Zim, along with a small team of contributors. It was left unfinished for quite a while, but it had a revival in December of 2024 with a large update. It's still not completely finished, yet it's in a much better place than where it left off at. Hopefully one day the full Xbox port experience will be viable for fans to enjoy. And for those wondering about emulation, it's playable, but its visual glitches ruin the experience, hence the need for a recreation mod. It's my favorite version as it gives Sam more of a unique personality through the extra cutscenes that are added in, has a distinct art style that fits the cartoonish nature of the games, splits hour-long levels in half to help the pacing despite it being primarily for console limitations, and of course more music to enjoy. Some controversial changes were made, such as the health degeneration if it is above 100, which is just a terrible change, and the live system, which acts as a replacement for quick saves for console players. Because of its limited availability, we can cross off the Xbox version. Another one that we can eliminate is the HD version, as Fusion offers better compatibility, optimization, mod support, and a bunch of small fixes like the minigun reverting back to how it was in the classic version. Even though Fusion is labeled as a beta, Crow Team isn't updating it anymore, and it's unlikely that Serious Sam 4 or 2 will be included in it. Despite that, it can be considered as an updated version of HD. Now this begs the question, is Revolution an updated version of Classic? In my opinion, yes. This had to be said due to a negative connotation that Revolution has of being buggy and unfinished. It is finished with some unaddressed bugs that aren't a big deal, just like any other game. Classic is the same deal, but with a couple of more prominent bugs that negatively affect the gameplay, such as the weapon slowdown issue and more broken spawners. Some of the problems that I had with Revolution were one label going off the screen in the Netriska menu and the Neon Survival map not saving my time. Other than that, I've had no crashes, stutters, or any technical issues. Everything ran smoothly. I cannot speak on the Bright Island campaign as I have yet to play that, and I believe that this is where most of that negative connotation comes from. It is fair to only call that campaign buggy and unfinished, if it is, but we're not here for that. Revolution updates the classic versions with some much needed improvements. It has 64-bit compatibility and better resolutions. although the Nitrissa text is hard to read. Revolution offers Steam Workshop and Steamworks support, but online play is dead for any serious Sam game. I've seen conflicting information about mods. Some say it's better for mod makers to mod the original than it is to mod Revolution, but Classic does not have the Steam Workshop, so it's less convenient for the user to install. Revolution does add a new campaign called Bright Island, however, we'll talk about it another time. As for the gameplay changes, broken spawners, which Decino has a couple of excellent videos on, are mostly fixed, yet there are still a few that are broken. The weapon slowdown bug, which Decino also has a video detailing it, is fixed. Enemies don't get stuck in the abyss on Moon Mountains except for the ringed waterfall part. Survival mode was added in, and some other minor things like being able to change the UI style. The default UI is reminiscent of the classic Second Encounters UI, which thankfully glosses over the First Encounter's rather ugly UI. But there is my beloved Xbox UI that is available to choose among others. Revolution also changes the graphics in a subtle way, both with lighting and textures. It's hard to notice until you look at them side by side. In Revolution, the textures are a bit more sharper and clearer, most notably at longer distances. It's like Sam has better vision. I'm not keen on graphic settings, but this is most likely due to me being able to run Revolution in a 1980 by 1080 resolution, while I'm stuck on 1280 by 720 for the original. Revolution has brighter reflections, so things like stone or water will look like it had more white mixed into its color. The original contains more shaded colors in direct light. This is clearly shown during the storm sequence at the beginning of the game. Revolution also has sharper shadows, which is more of a detriment in my opinion. They end up looking very blocky and artificial. The original also has the same blocky shadows, yet their edges are faded so it doesn't look so pronounced. I like the visual clarity in Revolution over the original, but you can't go wrong with either. They pretty much look the same when you're running and gunning. If you buy the original or Revolution, you'll get the other for free so you can see which works better for you. There are plenty of settings to mess around with too. Revolution is a good updated version of Serious Sam Classic that stays faithful to it more so than Fusion, which I will show soon. So we can mark off Classic, leaving us with Revolution and Fusion, or an updated Serious Engine 1 and Serious Engine 2017. There are two easy deal breakers in favor of Fusion: the mod community and verified Steam Deck compatibility. Fusion has a much more expansive and active modding community, along with being verified playable on the Steam Deck. The best that you're going to get for mods in Revolution are map packs and texture packs. It also does not work on the Steam Deck. If either of those matter to you, Fusion is the best way to play Serious Sam, even if you compare it to any other version. If you only care about the campaign experience, there are some details that can be considered small, but others have a significant impact on how the game plays between the two engines, one of which is how they handle physics. The first issue tied to the physics is hard to describe, and it's one of those things where you have to play it to notice it, like driving a car. Sam has more weight to him in Classic than in HD. This also applies to the enemies as well. In the making of Serious Sam 3 BFE video, they had trouble keeping enemies stuck to the ground with a wearable gaining flight, so that most likely shows the issue with things feeling floaty. Admittedly, it is a minor issue, but if you like your shooters to feel more grounded and weighty, then Revolution is the way to go. Other physics issues pertain to Clear, wearables, and to a lesser extent the cannon. Clear and wearables in Fusion tend to slip and slide, which makes them more erratic and harder to manage than Revolution. This can also occur with Gunnar, but they're not that dangerous, so it's not much of a glaring issue as the other two. It's very janky, and it makes the Clear and wearables too unpredictable. Part of the learning curve is learning their movement patterns so that you can dodge them, and you can't reliably do that in Fusion. Their tendency of getting behind the player makes it especially worse. If you can't reliably predict what they're going to do behind you, then that layer of skill over the game is gone. For the cannon, its damage is based solely on its charge in Fusion, while in Classic is based on the cannonball's momentum. That speed is also based on its charge, but if you bounce it off a wall or penetrate through enemies, then it will lose a little bit of damage. Not a whole lot of damage is lost, but it is noticeable with major biomechnoids who will die in one charged cannonball shot, but not if it lost any momentum. So in Revolution, it is better to aim at the head of a major biomechnoid to kill it in one shot. Aiming along the ground with enemies in the way will lessen its damage and leave it barely alive. Fusion also has an issue where point-blank cannon shots consistently go off in some other direction rather than in a straight line like they're supposed to. This ruins the whole point of lining the cannonball up to pierce through many enemies, or as Sam likes to call it, go bowling. It works fine at a distance, still it's a pain when trying to maximize the carnage of each cannonball shot. The change in the physics engine also caused some secrets and an area in Sacred Yards that involved gravity ships to be changed or removed in Fusion. These are kept intact in Revolution. It's not that important in the first encounter as Crow Team was mainly just showing off their homemade engine, but it does detract a lot more in the second encounter as some of the fights rely on those quirks. In Revolution, dead enemies keep their hitbox for a little bit, which is mainly an issue with wereballs as their body will block your rockets or your movement for a moment. Fusion does not have this problem. Swapping weapons is faster in Fusion than it is in Revolution. It may seem small, but sometimes you have to stick to the weapon that you have equipped during a fight because swapping will mean that Kamikaze, a clear, or anything else will get closer to damaging you. You can just swap to the best weapon for the situation in Fusion. Fusion also has better AI pathfinding than any other version, so enemies will be able to find their way up to you or around buildings. In older versions, they would continue running at a wall or get stuck on buildings. On one hand, it adds a bit of tension as you don't know where they might be stuck at. On the other, better pathfinding does get rid of some of the cheesy methods of dealing with some areas. Of course, Fusion is technically better than Revolution with better giving, ragdolls, particle effects, lighting, and detailed textures. However, Classic and Revolution are artistically better than HD or Fusion. The use of lighting is better. The skyboxes are up to personal preference, but I much prefer the ones in Classic. And the HD ditches the original's bright and cartoony look for a more realistic approach. It doesn't come off that well. Meanwhile, Classic or Revolution use an art style that will keep it aging more gracefully than HD or Fusion will. Even the little things like the slippery floor in the Valley of the Kings being removed, changing the portal in Karnak along with the gravity secrets being ruined, the wereballs not giving as much push as they used to, and harpies being seemingly more sluggish and not having their speed boost when kicking. These things could be seen as pedantic since new players won't notice the difference, but as a fan, it makes things feel off. Let's look at the first area of Oasis as an example. In Fusion, there's a layer of green everywhere. The skybox is a clear blue sky for the most part. The water, while it does reflect nicely, it mainly looks like a mirror. Looking at the building, it's just a tan, smooth box that doesn't have much going on. The highly detailed weapon compared to everything else makes this look like an asset flip game. Hopping over to Revolution, there are mountains in the skybox, a clear mix of green and brownish yellow on the ground for grass and sand along the light blue water, and the building has more details and layers to its design that makes it feel Egyptian. It has multiple shades of that brownish tan stone color along with gray and white. Everything fits and flows together in a natural way. If that doesn't convince you, let's take a look at another example. These changes also have an effect on the atmosphere of the levels, especially in the Tomb of Ramses III. In Fusion, the level is brighter and lacks the initial impression of a dark and spooky tomb that the original gives. Sure, the lighting is more dynamic, but the goal of this section was to invoke a specific tone which the lighting does not support. Looking at Revolution, the level is darker and complements the screechy fight track very nicely. You'd think that this would be the place to show off the improved lighting effects, but Fusion just doesn't do it. And for an Egyptian tomb, you'd want that place to feel creepy. Improved lighting is a big technical point for Fusion, but if it fails at utilizing it to enhance an environment, then what's the point? There are a bunch of other visual changes, such as the coloring, which will come down to personal preference. I'll show some comparisons and let you decide which looks better. They will be shown on the default settings of selecting the quality graphics option. It's because of these differences in gameplay and art style that I cannot recommend Fusion if you don't care about mods or playing Serious Sam on the Steam Deck. As such, I will be using Revolution as the basis for this analysis. I will also be ignoring the secret weapons that were added in Revolution for parity across all versions. It will also be in the context of the Serious difficulty mode. I believe that Serious showcases the gameplay much better than any other difficulty option, which allows me to explore the game's mechanics at their fullest. For the record, I am aware of all of the other releases and ports of Serious Sam: The First Encounter. They aren't relevant. If you want to learn more, go watch Frame Raider's video on it. It's not a surprise that trying to buy Serious Sam is a bit weird with all of the different versions. In short, buying the classic First Encounter will give you the classic Second Encounter and Revolution for free. The same goes if you buy the classic Second Encounter or Revolution, so you only need to buy one classic version to get them all. This does not work for the HD versions, however. Buying either of the HD encounters, Serious Sam 3, or the VR games will give you Fusion for free, but only the game that you bought will be playable on Fusion. So if you bought the HD First Encounter and own no other game, then you can only play the First Encounter on Fusion. The same goes for the HD Second Encounter, Serious Sam 3, and the VR ports. You cannot play the classic versions or Revolution on Fusion, or you can buy the Gold Collection on Steam and own every version of the first two encounters along with the DLC. Wait for a sale for any of the games since they get heavily discounted. Continuing the trend of being unnecessarily complicated, there are currently 3 different ways that the First Encounter story begins from. In the original release, the ancient alien sky was right all along and traces of ancient advanced alien technology were uncovered beneath Egypt at the dawn of the 21st century. This discovery allowed humankind to live and explore the far reaches of the universe. However, it didn't last long. Monsters from another dimension spawn in and attack human civilization in the year 2004. Humankind doesn't stand a chance as they are forced back from Alpha Centauri to our solar system. During these planetary battles, Sam Sirius Stone becomes a legend and a symbol of Earth's resistance due to its bravery. Basically like Duke Nukem but interplanetary. However, the fight comes to Earth and humankind's extinction draws near. The world leaders turn to the Time Lock, an ancient alien artifact that can teleport a single person back in time. This is all that we're given within the game, yet there is so much rich history left on their long-forgotten website. Thank you, Internet Archive. If we take a look, we get the perspective of a professor named Linda Bennett, who isn't mentioned in any Serious Sam game until Siberian Mayhem, where she is pictured as the Person of the Year on a magazine cover and 2 newspaper excerpts that talk about her work. In the year 2061, she is taking a rest on Titan, one of Saturn's moons, a few months deep on a mission. She reflects on the discovery of alien technology under Egypt. In 1965, and quite the engineering feat, the Temple of Abu Simbel was relocated to avoid being submerged. That was a real event, in case you didn't know. Since the land that the temple used to be on has no archaeological value anymore, an oil company drilled underneath and discovered an underground crypt. It contained alien technology accompanied by documentation written in a similar fashion to Egyptian hieroglyphs. This was left by the Syrians, an ancient alien race that hails from the solar system Sirius. This part is interesting because the axis of the real-life Abu Simbel temple is positioned to where sunlight would illuminate the statues on the back wall, except for the statue of Ptah, a god associated with the realm of the dead, leaving him in the dark. He's not necessarily a god of the dead, he just performs a specific role of allowing the deceased to regain their senses to experience the afterlife, otherwise known as the opening of the mouth ceremony. But what's more important are the dates at which this happens, October 22nd and February 22nd. These correspond with the helical rising of the star Sirius, a time where a star is visible again after being concealed by the sun's position as the Earth orbits around it. Also note that Sirius is the brightest star that we can see, excluding the sun. The ancient Egyptians noticed that the helical rising of Sirius happened shortly before the annual flooding of the Nile River. It also marks the start of the Egyptian calendar. They believed that Sotet, the goddess representation of Sirius, caused the flooding each year and brought fertility to the land. I'll speculate on this soon. The Assyrians wanted their technology to be easily discovered and translated as they warn of Ugta, or the Age of Infinite Death. This age is reigned by the one infinite, Ta'um, or Mental as we know him as. The Syrians called him Chad Shin, which means wizard exterminator. Ancient Egyptians did believe in and use magic in their daily lives, most notably the spells within the Book of the Dead and in their stories about their deities. Mental is the last immortal whose sole goal is to wipe out any and all intelligent forms of life. The Syrians were a victim of this bloodbath, except for the expedition team on Earth, who hid their spaceship on Titan, the largest moon of the planet Saturn. Some of the Syrians committed suicide from having to lay low and use primitive technology. They were deprived of their culture, leading to the few left to become mentally unstable and play as gods and pharaohs of the Egyptian people. Now this is where the fun speculation comes in. The gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt performed acts that the people would perceive as divine or magical. The Syrians could have performed those feats, such as flooding the Nile River, with the use of their advanced technology. Maybe the start of the Egyptian calendar corresponds with the helical rising of Sirius because it's the only connection that the Syrians have left of their home solar system. Maybe Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky because of the battles between Mental and the Syrians. There are acts of insanity between each other which plays into their mental instability, such as the contendings of Horus and Set. There's a family tree of the Egyptian gods, so it shows that the Syrians did try to prolong their species. Also, there are some gods and goddesses that are associated with fertility and not necessarily for agriculture, such as Min and Taweret. Perhaps mummification was their hope that one day they may be brought back to life with the proper technology once humans discovered the crypt. I know that this is a lot of speculation, yet a lot of this aligns too perfectly. I'm not saying it was Syrians, but it was Syrians. Their last sane act was creating the crypt to house their warning. The Syrians eventually faded with time, most likely due to their mental instability. Back on Titan, Bennett's team is researching the Syrian spaceship to understand interstellar travel for humanity to explore, expand, and exploit. Naturally, humans ignored the warnings. Since the Syrians were wiped out only a few thousand years ago and Mental's arrival was typically every few 100,000 years, they believe that an attack is so far out that it doesn't matter to think about it now. In 2104, Sam Stone is commanding a ship towards the Sirius solar system, where they discover sphere-like asteroid belts orbiting each planet, something that the Syrians never mentioned. They examined one of the asteroids and found machinery of non-Syrian origin. These were set by Mental to detect any intelligent life. Humanity was now at war. Sam blamed himself for the incident and joined the defense force against Mental's armies. He was purposely reckless in an attempt to die, and as such always volunteered for the suicide missions. Always concentrated, precise, never smiled, laughed, cried, or feared, only wanting to kill more aliens, Sam earned the nickname Sirius. As one of the war's oldest veterans, Sam fought thousands of battles in a variety of ways like dogfights and assaults on bases. Sam was never defeated, becoming a symbol of Earth's defense against Mental. As we know, Sam wasn't enough. In 2113, a small group of officers and Sam are in the Syrian crypt on Earth. Their hope turns to the time lock, a device older than the Syrians that they acquired and brought to Earth. They never used it as they feared someone would come from the future and mess something up. They did not want it falling into Mental's possession. However, this is a plot hole as the expedition left early enough before Mental's attack. Nonetheless, the expedition team armed the time lock just before they disappeared to give the humans a chance if they ever needed one. The time lock works pretty much like its name. Once it's armed, it locks in its current time and space, which allows a person to time travel back to that particular time. Think of it like a save state. So they plan on Sam to go back in time to assassinate Mental so that he cannot attack humanity in the future. Mental would be at Sirius when the time lock was armed, so Sam would need to use the remote control device with its keys scattered across Egypt to have the Syrian spaceship on Titan arrive on Earth. The keys were scattered to prevent the expedition team from using the spaceship to go back to Sirius and avoid alerting Mental of their presence. There is an inconsistency with this since the keys are mentioned to be the 4 elements. In the game, the 4 elements are used to open the gate to Thebes, which is where the remote control is located. They aren't necessarily needed to activate the remote control. However, the gate to Thebes was locked by its citizens due to a raid by the rulers of Memphis. Those rulers didn't like the growing power and influence of Thebes, hence why they did it. This is also where Sirius Sam goes on its own hypothetical timeline in regards to real-life history, disregarding the whole ancient alien stuff. The interesting parts here are how the people of Thebes locked their gate with magic, and how this civil war started the beginning of the end of the Egyptian Empire, since they no longer had the assistance of their gods, or the Syrians in this case. It seems like the Syrians favored the southern region of Egypt, as Thebes was a religious center and the time lock is located nearby. However, they most likely used their influence to have the relatively northern region, where Memphis is located, to build the Great Pyramid of Giza to house the landing pad of their spaceship. There is no definite timeline given of when the Syrians died out, but we can infer that it occurred after the pillage of Thebes, as Sam arrives after those events happened in 1378 BC. We do, however, get a clearer idea in Siberian Mayhem. There's a newspaper article of the Abu Simbel discovery which dates the Syrian chamber as being from 1500 BC to 1100 BC. Keep in mind that the timeline in BC terms counts down in years as time progresses. The anachronistic artifacts within the chamber that the article mentions most likely refers to the time lock being older than the Syrians, along with any Syrian technology that they brought with them. Since we know that the time lock was armed in 1378 BC, or at least around that year due to the time lock's imprecision, we can make a confidence interval of the Syrians dying out in Egypt a little bit after 1378 BC to a little bit before 1100 BC. Around 1500 BC is the start of the New Kingdom era of ancient Egypt, and around 1100 BC is the fall of the New Kingdom, as well as the Late Bronze Age collapse. So this lines up pretty well in terms of history. One could say that the Syrians came and lived on Earth during Egypt's New Kingdom period. That would be nice, yet the Great Pyramid is a Syrian construct that was built around 2600 BC, and Egypt's mythology is much older. Either those anachronistic artifacts tell the truth and the Syrians, for some reason, didn't create the Abu Simbel chamber until thousands of years after their arrival, or things are getting retconned. Time is weird in Sirius Sam lore, so that could be another explanation despite being a poor one. There is no clear-cut answer, but the Syrians not building the chamber until thousands of years after their arrival is the most clean explanation regardless of the odd decision-making. At the very least, we have an idea of when the Syrians died out. Back to the 4 elements, the actual key in the game to call the spaceship is the sign of Amun-Ra, which was stolen during the raid on Thebes and was placed in Memphis. There are more inconsistencies, like how that sign was used in a ritual to call the gods, or Syrians, from the sky where they would hang out for a bit, then fly away on their spaceship until called again. At this point, it feels like maybe this original story isn't canon by the time the game was made, and I would agree. However, the Syrian pictograms Netriska entry shows some of the points made, such as the Syrians being treated as gods, and the translations made about Syrian technology that were discovered in the Abu Simbel temple. It also gives context to the pillage of Thebes and how the Egyptians grew tired of building offerings to the Syrians and how the Syrians lived in Thebes. It's a bit of a mess, made even worse with how this entry tells that the Great Pyramid of Giza is in Thebes when it's actually in Memphis. Maybe in Sirius Sam's timeline, the pyramids were built in Thebes, But if it was truly based on ancient Egypt, then they got Memphis and Thebes mixed up. Maybe there was a mistake made within Crow Team given how Lower Egypt, where Memphis is actually the geographical northern part of Egypt, while Upper Egypt is the southern part where Thebes is. Sam's journey, portrayed by the map during the loading screens, shows him going from south to north, reinforcing the possibility of this mistake. Everything else, such as the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut and the Valley of the Kings, are in their correct geographical position. Serious Sam 3 also corrects this mistake in its story, so it's very odd that Memphis and Thebes swapped places along with all of the other inconsistencies mentioned about the writing. Back to the officers and Sam, their plan after getting the spaceship is to fly to a Syrian colony on Proxima Centauri and use their merchant teleports from one colony to another until reaching Sky City at Sirius. He can't fly straight to Sky City, or else Mental will notice him, but he won't notice a single man devastating its armies by the Horde on multiple planets. This alludes to the original vision of Serious Sam and its 40 levels of fighting on multiple themed planets after Egypt. They also explain how the time lock can only send a limited amount of mass, so it's just Sam, his knife, and his favorite Smith & Wesson. One interesting thing here is that they explain why there are supplies scattered around in Egypt. It's the surviving humans sending as many supplies as they can through the time lock. I usually see people theorize that these supplies come from a future that Sam saved, which implies that he is successful in assassinating Mental, but this disproves that. However, this whole backstory did get partially retconned, as we'll see soon, so the theory could still be valid. Although I don't buy that humans would send supplies back to the past in a timeline where Sam killed Mental. They have no reason to, since they're already safe. Additionally, there's another issue that I'll mention soon. It's explained that Netriska, or Neurotronically Implanted Combat Situation Analyzer, is a neurological implant that has access to his audio and visual experiences. Also, the time lock is described to be within the Syrian crypt, not outdoors. The last part of the story describes Sam stepping into the time lock. One key detail that they mention is that the time lock will alarm Mental both in the present and the past. They will not know that Sam is there, but Mental's forces will be on their way to wipe out the remaining Syrians on Earth and the Egyptians who they will discover. Sam may arrive before or after Mental's minions due to the time lock's imprecision. This explains why there is no one else in the game. However, it doesn't explain why enemies spawn in to engage Sam, as he has obviously arrived way after the enemies did. And with Earth already killed off before Sam gets back to the past, humanity is doomed with Sam as the only human left alive. Maybe they hope that the timeline that Sam lived in will live on if he can assassinate Mental quick enough, since Mental is interdimensional. Yet Sam will always be alone in a doomed timeline. This begs the question if Sam is either saving humanity or avenging it. This is a lot richer than what we get in the games. It still seems to be canon, as there are references to the story even as current as Siberian Mayhem, or at least parts of it are. It also explains why Sam would take a mission that would leave him stuck in the past. Yet it does contrast with Sam's personality in the game, as he's portrayed as being more edgy in the story, given from the line, "Never mind, it will be my pleasure to blow them off," Sam comments without a smile. Even though this comment would get questioned by Chris Hansen, I'm glad that Crow Team veered off that route and opened up Sam to one-liners and having a personality. Remember when I said that there are 3 different ways that Serious Sam starts? Luckily, the other 2 aren't that long. The second way is more cartoony and comes from the Xbox port. It starts with the same scrolling text, but cuts off before explaining what all went wrong after exploring space. Instead of telling, it shows Earth in turmoil in an all-new cutscene. Located in Zagreb, which is actually where Crow Team originates from, it showcases the city being overrun by Mental's forces and Sam Serious Stone doing what he does best. He also has a lot more emotion as a witty action hero than he does in the original story. Just from this port, we don't really know what went wrong or who Sam is, but it looks fun, so who cares? Eventually, he's overwhelmed and runs to the time lock. I would say that the only thing faithful to the original story is how the time lock is within a building. It's a fun cutscene, but pretty poor in storytelling. Obviously, it's not canon unless Crow Team considers it an alternative timeline. The last way that Serious Sam starts is Crow Team's new official way going forward. It's the ending of Serious Sam 3, which I'll save for another time. For now, the original story suffices. I will say that having a lot of the story hidden away in a webpage that is now long since gone is just bad storytelling. Granted, it is from an era where it was more expected to read the manual to get the backstory. However, so many details are gone by tucking it away on a different medium. Likewise, it allowed Crow Team to throw most of it away in favor of Serious Sam 3 BFE's story.